Check, check. But what is a clock?
Horology is the study of time. These things all measure time, just over different periods. So why not the position of the planets?
But you know, in movies, where they're in like a wizard tower or something, you see like a weird looking solar system. Those things are called orreries, and I'm going to try to make one without the magic.
Here's my prototype. Little confusing, so let's walk back a couple of steps, see how we ended up here. The first problem you need to solve is how do you control the positions of the planets? I went with this, the 4-bar linkage. Just by moving these 2 points in and out, I can control the final point in 2D space. Now the next thing I need to figure out how to do is to mechanically program how these 2 levers move so that I get the outcome that I want. Luckily, I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's something that already exists, and it's called a cam.
Ordinarily, we think of a cam as a mechanism that changes a simple motion, such as rotation, to an irregular or intermittent motion.
But what is a cam? This is a cam. This is a cam. This is also a cam. Basically, all cams are just a irregularly shaped thing that spins. And then depending on the shape of the cam in this system, we get a different output. So with this shape of cams, that translates along the readers, and then this is what the output looks like for this profile. Then if we have a different shape, like a heart and then like a weird little blob, you get a different output. However, because we're tracing out the position of the planets over time, we're looking for an ellipse. And so the tricky part is finding what shape of cam makes an ellipse. Now I could sit here and try to calculate all the kinematics of this mechanical system, but that's nerd shit. What I can do instead is just work hard instead of think hard. When you think about it, all I have to do is just line up these holes and then just measure the distance between these 2 posts, and then do that for this side as well. And then just repeat that for each location, and I'll end up with the shape that I need. Now that I have those measurements, all I need to do is take then this graph and wrap them around a circle, and that's how I'll get the cam profile that I need. This is what it looks like. It works! Oh, that's so nice. But why does it leave the circle? That's super weird. Whatever. So to recap, we have the 4-bar linkage, we have the cams, these are the readers, and then the last thing is these little guys called the links. Now the only reason we need those is because these move in an arc and these move in a straight line, so we need something in between, otherwise the mechanism will just jam up.
So I've been designing this thing for a couple of months. I think I'm finally at the point where the only thing left to do is to actually start building this thing. Except what's a little embarrassing is all this time I've thought about designing mechanical components. I've never used a 3D printer before. So there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve.
First part of making this a real thing is I need to pick some bearings, basically.
I don't have a 3D printer, but my local library does. And so I had this made. I made this jig basically just to find out what size is going to be good for like a press fit. So that's actually pretty good. Too thin, too big, and too big. Good to know. We know that this size is correct. That's too tight. That feels just right. Smooth. We have our 2 measurements. Man, I'm so glad I picked these bearings. Just look at how like low friction they are. I'm just tilting by maybe like a degree or 2. Oh, I'm so happy. This is going to be amazing.
And an audience time passes.
So, a lot has happened since we last spoke. Let's do a little catch up. It's been this long? Who was in the original video? A lot of these are newcomers. This guy's from the first one. I ended up buying a 3D printer, and I'm really happy with it. I've been using it way more than I thought I would, because the amount of prototypes and revisions have been insane. It is really incredible how much scrap you produce when you just design things and don't think about how they're physically going to fit together. So after way longer than it should have been, I have a single planet designed and ready to go.
So the thing I first showed you was version 1. This is like version 6. I know it looks way different, but actually this is the same machine. And I'll explain. These two cams here just got stacked one on top of the other. These two readers over here got turned into rocker arms over here. The links in between are still links in between. And this scissor lift type mechanism is still the same. It's just now designed with bearings in mind. And just ignore those gears in the back for now. We'll get to them later.
The beauty of this is it's just the cam profile. That's the hard thing to do. Now I can just stack multiple of these together. But there were so many things that got in the way before I could get to just this point. Or actually, let me put this mic down and show you how this works real quick. Back, we got a little guy here. And so I rotate this, and it follows the cam. And it goes around and around and around. I've taken a rotating thing, and I've made it do a circle with way more steps than necessary. Incredible. In the meantime, sources of error have been popping up absolutely everywhere. If the bearings don't fit perfectly and it's not a good press fit and there's a little bit of wiggle room, huge error. Everything that this machine does takes a small input of the cam and it multiplies it over and over. So any small slop ends up in a big problem. Everything needs to be relatively tight tolerance. Other sources of error were the cams themselves. That exact mathematical profile that they follow. There's very basic examples that I could find online, but for this exact thing where you have a rocker arm with a set radius of a follower, whatever it's called, I had to invent my own way to figure this out, and I couldn't do it without CAD software. That is what took probably more than half of the time, was just coming up with a way to make that shape. But now that I have that process, it's a little brute forcey, but I only have to do it 4 times.
Just as a little demonstration, here's how I would go about generating a cam profile. You line up the pin in one of 24 positions, and then you measure this distance, record it, and then measure this distance and record that. Repeat this for all positions, so that's 24 positions. Once you have those measurements, we can take that and put it into a sketch where we apply all these distances and wrap them around a circle like this. But why does it leave the circle? That's super weird. Whatever. One of the first mistakes I made was that I was designing the cam profile based off of a knife edge follower, when in reality there is a small radius that is accepted here. Do you notice the difference in error when this thinks it should be here, but in fact it is contacting the wheel here? The next major source of error to compensate for was the fact that this radius is now moving on a rocker arm instead of in a linear way. It's a big issue because the cam profile thinks this is linear, but in reality the rocker arm means that it's displaced by this amount. Now the cam profile is all dialed in. Now we have to make sure that each planet takes the right amount of time to orbit compared to each other.
All right, let's talk about gears. So each planet has a different number of Earth days that it takes to make a single year. So the issue you have is the difference between these axes are fixed at, for example, my project, it's at exactly this distance. So we can vary the radius of each input and output to give us the ratio that we need. So we know that the radius of gear A plus the radius of gear B are going to equal this distance here of A over B is going to equal the ratio that we saw before. And then you just solve the system of equations to give you the different radius for each gears. Then now, let's say this is a gear profile. We just found this radius here, which is something called, here, I gotta look this up. This is called the pitch circle. And so once we have this, we again look back at our ratio. Let's take Earth, for example. You need to find the closest whole number that solves for this equation right here. Because if for gear teeth, you can only have a whole number of gear teeth. So then this leads you down kind of a fun rabbit hole of fractional approximations for decimals. Like, for example, 22 divided by 7 is somewhat close to pi. And then we just repeat all of this for each planet, and we're good to go. I've been thinking about how fast I should make these planets move, and I'm leaning towards going slower, because they are planets at the end of the day. These take a year to go around, but I don't want to go that slow. So I got this. It says 2 RPM. We'll see if that's true. And then I bought this to power it, and I didn't realize that, of course it just doesn't plug in. So, yep. Positive. Okay. And then let's, it is really cool to see. So this is about how fast Earth is going to orbit. Mars is about half as slow, whereas Mercury is almost 4 times faster. So that's what we're going to get to see.
Okay, time to build everything.
I don't know if you can see this, but I need to talk to my quality control guy. I don't know how they got printed all wonky like that. And the new one just finished. How do I push this down? Oh. I think I put this on upside down, but it's too late now. Whoops. Let's go on upside down. That's gonna be okay. That is it working, dude. So exciting. Moment of truth. That's what it's all about. That's what this whole thing's been for. That's what it's all about. See, it's kind of wispy. I'm gonna go hold this over my stove for a second. Beautiful. I'm starting to get why they don't make orreries this way. This is way too difficult. I'm running out of bearings, so I need to take apart the first prototype. This kind of hurts to do, but it's got to get done. It's kind of weird. This is what it looks like when it's unwound. Here, I want you to look at this. So, when looking at it from above, you can see how this is kind of a little wonky. So, I made this just so that it all gets held in place just right. That's a planet right there. When you really think about it. I think it just needs something on the front to hold it together so that everything doesn't flex out of the way. I think the front plate, we're going to go for something a little weird. Atlas, that character that holds the world up? Well, what about like the solar system? So I think, just flashbang warning. We're gonna go for a guy that's like this, right? But like kind of an artsy representation of that. Lock it in, dude. Send it to the printer. We're good to go. God, my hands hurt so bad from pressing those bearings in. Jeez, I never want to work with bearings this small ever again. This is horrible. Unfortunately, the Buddha needs to go outside. He gets to watch the sunrise now. From this angle. And a very irresponsible person on a motorcycle. God. Oh no. Oh, it really struggles with the guy on the end. You got it.
Do you see what I mean about the front though? Like the resemblance is uncanny.
You got it, buddy. Yeah. Look at that thing. The issue is, this is the powered shaft that goes through. By the time it gets all the way out here, this is the place where it has the most torque. The whole shaft kind of twists and bends. I think, unfortunately, this planet needs to go. Bringing us down to 3. Gotta get Mercury out of here. Now, are you ready? That is so much better. It's a little noisy. He's a little noisy, but oh, that's so cool. Like this is been like about 6 months since I first started thinking about this to actually seeing it work. It's so cool. So in the 6 months or so that I've been designing and building this thing, I've come up with about 12 other ideas. I'm sure if you like making things, you feel the same way, that it's impossible to get to everything. But I'm going to do my best. So with that being said, I made a Discord. The link's in the bio. So if you want to stop by and just see the things that I'm working on, maybe share some advice. If you see something I'm doing and you have a better way to do it, please let me know, either there or in the comments. But yeah, I got a couple of really cool things in the works right now. But I'm not going to share anything just yet. But Ben, I'm really excited for the next couple of months. I think it's going to be really, really cool. Would this tone not be perfect as a backdrop? There's Banksy, and then there's Janksy, baby. No way that's an original joke. Janksy